Okay, so thank you everyone for joining. I'm going to give it a couple minutes to maybe a minute or two to get everyone filtering in here, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So just hang tight. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started introducing. Again, thank you all for joining. My name is John McNamara. I'm a technical sales engineer here for Sodick Injection Molding Machinery. We are hosting Syensqo to give their webinar today and want to introduce some of our team, and then we'll get started. So first, I'll introduce Bennett Howard. He's another one of our sales guys. Um, and Bryce Masco. He's another one. They covered various territories around the country, key targets for us. And then we have our national sales manager on here as well, Len Hampton. Len, if you'd like to
Hello,
say
everybody.
anything, go
Thanks for
ahead.
joining. Yeah, no, thanks so much. We're really pleased to have Syensqo, their team together, Natalie, Allison, and good friend Jordan. Syensqo actually has a Sodick lab machine that we just started up a few months ago. So maybe you guys might have some questions regarding that too. Jordan will be happy to answer any questions regarding lab stuff. So thanks everybody for coming. I see a lot of familiar faces here. Good to see. I think this is number 40 or 41 of our Sodick and Friends webinar platform. And we've got another 4 or 5 more in the queue pretty much every 2 to 3 weeks. So keep an eye out for emails and LinkedIn posts and things like that. But thank you again for joining.
Okay, thanks, Len. And I will go ahead and stop sharing this. Allison, if you want to put your presentation up on the screen. We're joined today by Natalie Dragonaut, Allison Taylor, and Jordan Ziegenbane from Syensqo. They're going to be going over their presentation about their Syensqo's materials for the healthcare industry. Before we get started, I'm going to explain a little bit about how the webinar will work. We'll go about 45 minutes of presentation, and then we'll have a Q&A portion at the end. So if you could see the Q&A tab at the top of your screen, you can click that and type your questions there. You can submit them throughout the presentation or right at the end when we're doing the Q&A portion. And I will go ahead and read those questions to the Syensqo folks, and they'll be able to answer your questions. And then also Len mentioned we have some upcoming webinars as well. I wanted to get those out there. So we have Leonine Technologies on October 1st. We have Beaumont Technologies on October 15th. And then right now we have Nexus coming up in December. So we'll fill out a little bit more in November, but those are the next 3 on the calendar. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you guys to get started.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, Sean. Thanks to Sodick and Friends for hosting us today and letting us share more about Syensqo and our material solutions for the healthcare space. To just look at the agenda that we'll be covering, we'll just do a brief introduction on Syensqo and then dive into the healthcare markets that we serve, that our materials are served. And then finally, we'll share some of the latest studies in micromolding that we're working on and how we support our customers in the market. So an introduction to Syensqo, formerly Solvay. Syensqo was launched in 2023 to address the specialty chemicals business and the needs of the specialty chemicals markets. We can go to the next slide. So you can see we serve a wide range of industries, from aerospace to mining to health and beauty, and of course, healthcare, which we speak about today. Next slide. Looking specifically at healthcare, you can see our materials have served the healthcare space for 60 years, going back to 1965, when UDEL PSU replaced cellulose acetate and blood filtering membranes, all the way up to today, where our ECO portfolio of sustainable polymer materials was launched last year. Next slide. And then this is a graphical representation of the polymer pyramid from a high level. You can see that Syensqo polymers are found at the top of this pyramid in the high performance category. Our materials are most often used in the harshest of environments, where chemical resistance, temperature resistance, and mechanical toughness are really critical. The orange face of this pyramid represents our legacy materials, and the green face represents our ECO portfolio of sustainable polymers. And with that, I'll turn it over to Allison.
Oops, I think I was muted, sorry. Hi guys, this is Allison with Syensqo. I'm a CTD engineer, or Customer Technical Development Engineer. I support our customers in the healthcare space with the successful integration of our polymers into their applications from a technical level. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about polymers a little bit in general, rather than just throwing some brand names at you. So we'll get into just some quick introduction to what polymers are and what materials we make before talking more about how they actually perform and the benefits they have in the healthcare space. So as a quick intro to polymers, as I said, I don't want to throw too much chemistry at you. There are three main structures of materials, with thermosets being the cross-linking polymers on the left. That's like epoxies, rubbers, and once they're cross-linked, they're unable to be remelted. Unlike thermosets, thermoplastics have unlinked polymer chains that can be softened and reheated over and over again. So they can be reshaped and remolded throughout their time. You have two sets of thermoplastics. Amorphous polymers are the materials that lack structure in the polymer chains. So these are on the middle section. They're randomly arranged chains, while the semicrystalline polymers have highly ordered and repeating regions. These are what we call the crystals, and they're circled in yellow. Each polymer structure has its unique pros and cons, but note that Syensqo healthcare materials are across the thermoplastic range, and they're highlighted in blue. We do have thermoplastics, we do have thermosets available in the form of our Torlon PAI, but this is not a medical grade material. And then, as Natalie mentioned earlier, Syensqo has one of the broadest portfolios in the high-performance resin space. This allows Syensqo engineers like myself to have a toolbox to reach into and select the right tool from. We support a broad range of applications, so our portfolio has to be equally diverse while still being very robust. This is just a reference table of characteristics and the matching materials. So we'll move forward talking about the Syensqo sulfone portfolio, which has Radel PPSU in it, a prominent and historical material in the healthcare space. So for sulfone chemistry, as I mentioned, I want to break it down a little bit for you without getting too much into the weeds, but within a sulfone polymer, the aromatic groups, which are the ring structure you see in purple, provide bond stability in the polymer backbone, which manifests physically into temperature and chemical resistance. The caveat with aromatic rings is that there's a slight sensitivity to UV, but this is common across all aromatic compounds, and we can account for that in some applications. These sulfone materials are naturally transparent, as you see on the right, with UDEL PSU having a little bit lower yellowness color and Radel PPSU having a more inherent amber color. But this makes them one of the only transparent materials that has both chemical and thermal robustness in the thermoplastic healthcare space. This slide just shows the difference between the polymers in the sulfone family. Each material has a different R group, which influences the physical performance of the polymer. So as you move from Udel to Veridol and then Radol, you're actually increasing that aromatic content that I talked about earlier. You're increasing those rings in the backbone, which can contribute to that stability, and you'll get a little bit better thermal performance, a little bit higher TG. And this really highlights why Radol PPSU is the highest performing in the sulfone material, and we'll see where it's used and how we capitalize on its capabilities in the healthcare space. Again, just a slide to help show the difference in sulfone polymers. They have inherently excellent chemical resistance properties, which can be influential in the consumer, construction, and healthcare space, with, especially in the healthcare space, repeated exposure to aggressive disinfectants and also the demanding sterilization requirements. We see them routinely used where there's steam sterilization requirements, maybe if there's transparency required. And we also see them used in biopharma for their chemical resistance, as you can see in the component at the bottom. Now we'll briefly discuss some of the highlights of the semi-crystalline materials within our portfolio. So Syensqo resins have unique features in our semi-crystalline materials over our amorphous resin that I just mentioned. So some of those attributes are, the semi-crystalline materials will be opaque. They will have a little bit more anisotropic properties while also exhibiting higher stiffness and sometimes higher mechanical properties, just due to the inherent nature of those crystalline structures that are present. So to talk just briefly to Syensqo's semi-crystalline portfolio, we have a spectrum of high-performance semi-crystalline materials. You can think of these similar and kind of like cousins to a standard nylon. They're within the polyamide family, but they have unique chemical structures that you can see on the bottom that actually increase their capability from a thermal and chemical standpoint. So these are nylon-like materials, but they have more aromatic rings in the backbone. So similar to what I mentioned with the sulfones, as we go down and we add more and more aromatic rings, the higher aromatic content can provide this bond stability and overall increased performance. So what you see on the screen is an arrow moving from left to right, indicating that as you go further and further to the right, you increase in aromatic content, and as such, you might increase in performance. So depending on the needs of the application, we can help determine what level of performance is required and weigh that against, say, the economics, the aesthetics, and other considerations. And when in doubt, if those materials that I've listed can't help, if there's no other solution, we would consider our ultra polymers portfolio. These are really materials that are designed to go where no polymer has gone before, and that's when we would talk about our Ketaspire Peak and our Avaspire PAEK. So these are the highest performing materials in our portfolio and compatible with over 1,000 steam sterilization cycles. But they offer excellent fatigue resistance and mechanical performance due to their inherent semi-crystalline structure, but also because we have a variety of fillers available. So you'll see they have a melt temperature of upwards of 343 degrees. They have ester linkages, aryl, and ketones present to increase this performance. So we'll go ahead and talk about Syensqo in healthcare. Please feel free to add any questions to the Q&A if you have any comments or questions about our polymer portfolio. So Syensqo participates across the medical space, ranging from single-use technologies all the way to implantable devices. And we value the high performance, chemical resistance, and biocompatibility across our portfolio of products to help support our customers regardless of the type of device, dissection of the body, what type of surgery they support. We want to be able to provide a resin that can offer the unique attributes for them to be successful. We have material implemented in the biopharma space, in knee implants, hip implants, surgical instruments, and even more generic medical devices. Our medical materials are divided into classes based on the level of patient contact. So you'll recognize the Ketospire Peak, the XF Para, and Radel PPSU, which I've talked about just now. They fall within our limited exposure category. So while we do have high performance materials available for long-term implant, if you're looking at an application that has patient contact for 24 hours or less, we would look at our medical grade materials listed in the center. If you have any requests or applications that are within the healthcare space but don't have patient contact, so maybe in medical housing, maybe an internal component on a diagnostic system, we do have materials that you could consider. They just don't have the standard ISO 10993. And then all the way on the right, we have our implantable portfolio. So this would be materials where 24-hour or longer contact is needed. So 24-hour to lifetime, we would look at our implantable materials. We'll talk a little bit about our resins within the biopharma space. So I know this slide is a little bit overwhelming, but in general, pharmaceutical production is a very sensitive industry that requires precise chemical manufacturing for some of our most important medicines. You know, biopharma processing can be thought of, especially in this slide, as a very clean, shiny, compact chemical plant where you have standard chemical engineering units such as the filtration systems, the mixers, the separation units, and our materials are located throughout these components, whether it be in the containment areas like the sampling bags or the filtration steps with membranes. We might even be in the actual instrumentation like the connectors, valves, and sensors. So listed here are more applications where Syensqo polymers are present. You know, until recent years, stainless steel was the preferred material for the pharmaceutical manufacturing equipment, including components for just the standard manufacturing methods. However, with the industry need for more flexible production processing, you know, they want to reduce asset costs and have faster time to market. The single-use bioprocessing technology is becoming more and more prolific in this space. You know, we see it increasingly replacing steel. So over the past decade, the pharmaceutical industry has integrated single-use bioprocessing technology to accommodate this demand for, you know, quick turnaround. You know, they want more economical manufacturing. So the implementation of single-use systems, it helps eliminate the need for clean in-place technology and sterilization in-place technology. These are two major steps in the use of steel in bioprocessing, where basically in between running each batch of medicine and formulating each batch of medicine, they have to clean the units and sterilize them without taking them apart. This makes turnover a really laborious task, and so the production of one drug unit to the next batch of drug is quite slow. So to help, you know, introduce a faster, more rapid pace, single use, where they use technologies for one pass and then throw it away, has become increasingly popular as it, you know, increases manufacturing productivity and thus helps reduce some of the cost. So within single-use containment in the pharmaceutical industry, you know, this is really regulated stringently, as most healthcare applications are. But specifically in containment units, their goal is to ensure that no leachables and extractables could come out of the containment unit material and interact with chemistries inside the container. So these chemistries can be harsh, so chemical resistance is a critical requirement. The size, chemistries, transparency, and sterilization requirements of contaminant components will really help us determine whether to select a Key-to-Spire peak, really high performing, whether we would select a sulfone polymer for its transparency, or whether we would select XF para for its mechanical robustness, but maybe it doesn't see exposure to harsh chemistries. So that's kind of the thought process we use when working to select materials. We have multiple that could probably work, but we want to try and optimize. Hollow fiber membranes are a filtration system that's used uniquely in the biopharma space, and that's been a historical business for Syensqo, with our UDAL PSU really being introduced into this space, and it really kind of was what spearheaded Syensqo into the healthcare space. We found and we've observed that our UDAL PSU has a unique and optimized hydrophilic component that allows it to be an ideal filtration media for various filtration techniques. And within the biopharma space, we also support the filtration housing itself with our transparent chemical resistant sulfones that we talked about earlier. So you may notice that we have our fluoropolymers, SOLEF PVDF, listed at the bottom on the right. This is a material that has extreme chemical resistance and can be a compatible filtration media for maybe, say, like the most harsh, aggressive chemistries within biopharma. Syensqo is also very involved with connectors and sensors. This is kind of our bread and butter within the biopharma space. Some of the most critical requirements here are the dimensional stability, the transparency, and the moldability, as these are normally high volume parts, especially with the single-use turnaround. Within this space, there's a growing concern regarding BPA due to some of the historic polycarbonate used in these connectors. However, Syensqo sulfones can offer a higher level of chemical resistance while still offering the desired transparency and can be BPA free in some cases. So if you or your customers are interested in polycarbonate replacement within biopharma, because BPA is becoming more and more widely talked about, we would look to our UDAL PSU or our RADAL PPSU as a material for the most optimized solution. And then in general, any additional accessories and components can be evaluated based on how high performing they need to be. If the components need to be repeatedly sterilized, if they need to be very chemical resistant, then we would look to our Key-to-Spire peak. But if accessories are the single use and require high stiffness and strength, but don't necessarily see a lot of chemical exposure, we would consider our XF para. So really, it just comes down to a conversation about what the critical requirements are. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit about our surgical instruments and particularly our single-use instruments. So single-use in medical instrumentation is a growing field, especially in the industry today. You know, by principle, single-use instruments will lower any kind of hospital-borne illnesses that might come from, say, improper cleaning of reusable instruments, or just in general by limiting the amount of bacteria that can enter between the packaging, in between sterilization, and then future use. So single use might be a slight misnomer, as these instruments are used multiple times, but just on one patient. So just for one surgery. These devices are not designed for repeat sterilization, but the benefit there is that, now there is more design freedom available because there's a decrease in the amount of extreme conditions these parts will see. So in general, XF, you'll see bolded, is our main go-to for single-use instrumentation. But UDAL PSU is a unique offering that can provide maybe a little bit more ductility and toughness versus XF. But for a standard metal to plastic transition, we would normally consider our XF para here. And so what is XF para? We haven't really talked about it in depth except for that quick slide on the nylon-like materials, but XF is a polyaryl amide. So this is a semi-aromatic, semi-crystalline material within our thermoplastic family that's traditionally reinforced with glass fiber, but we do have options to reinforce it with carbon fiber or mineral fillers. XF para compounds have a unique combination of strength and aesthetics. So it makes them ideal for complex parts that require strength, but also a really nice surface finish. And as we know in the healthcare space, aesthetics can be a big portion of critical requirement for certain applications. So XF is what we like to call the marriage between aesthetics and strength. So what is so unique about this material is its ability to be filled with, say, 50, 60% glass fiber, yet the surface will still be glossy and free of defects if processed properly. XF has higher aromatic composition, so it has more rings in the backbone in comparison to other nylons like a PA66 or a PA64. So because of these rings, it will have lower water absorption, higher heat deflection temperature, less likely to deform due to that moisture absorption. I will say though, XF, as is standard for other polyamide-like materials, it's not compatible with steam sterilization. So that's why we really look at it for single use, is because when it's not designed to withstand steam sterilization, there can be benefit when it's applied to single use, since that's not a requirement. The amount of glass fibers and the inherent polymer structure in XF allow it to be one of the highest tensile modulus materials in our portfolio. So one of the stiffest for sure. And XF does flow extremely well and can fill out intricately designed parts that maybe otherwise would have been unattainable with a specialty material. So it's very well suited for the single-use instrumentation, especially when they have complex geometries. Again, just to highlight here that XF is an aesthetically derived material, and it's available directly from Syensqo in a variety of colors, just to help meet specific requirements and aesthetic requirements of the healthcare space. So these colors do come with gamma stabilizers to ensure there is no shift during gamma sterilization, which traditionally with all polymers, anything exposed to gamma might see a little bit of a shift, but luckily we've been able to identify a formulation that will help our XF maintain its nice coloration. So again, XF is our main material for metal to plastic replacement, and it's evidenced at the bottom right graph, which is a graph for specific modulus. So when considering the stiffness of XF versus metal from a pure modulus standpoint, it does look obviously like metal has a much higher stiffness and a much higher modulus. But when you compare stiffness for the density of both the metal and the XF, you'll see that XF, for its density as a polymer material, can have a comparable modulus to that of metal. So really this can manifest into, when you're designing with XF, just some considerations to maybe add a little bit higher mass of XF versus the mass of the original incumbent metal, maybe making the walls a little bit thicker, and just some general good metal to plastic considerations. So single-use instruments do not require the same level of robust design that a repeated polymer surgical instrument may need, especially since single-use instruments only see one round of sterilization, and this is traditionally a room temperature or low temperature sterilization like gamma or EO. Therefore, complex thin wall geometries, which would normally maybe pose a cleanability concern, would have no issues being gamma radiated, used, and then disposed. So because of that, more design freedom, maybe a little bit tougher, more complex part, But ICSF is a unique material solution because it's mechanically robust enough to handle, the high force that comes with instrumentation, while also being able to fill out really thin-walled, complex parts that would otherwise maybe be difficult to injection mold. The polymer parts will need to be designed to withstand, just one sterilization. And so the lack of heat cycling that comes with hundreds of autoclave cycles will not really be a barrier here. And that means maybe there's an opportunity for more lightweighting or consolidation of parts. And then here's an example of an application that was originally a metal instrument. And so it's been transitioned into plastic, specifically ICSF, because its unique features to fill out this geometry, fill out these thin walls, but also offer the stiffness and aesthetics that's required. Then we'll speak to reusable instruments. So reusable instruments have their role in the medical device space as well, but the most decisive factor in material selection is really the exposure to the aggressive, repeated autoclave or repeated sterilizations. Maybe it's vaporized hydrogen peroxide. It's most common for hospitals to use steam, which gets up an autoclave to 135 Celsius, so a temperature which is way too high for most polymers. However, Syensqo materials, the PSU, PPSU, PAEK, and PEEK, have all been tested to show compatibility with steam sterilization because they have the thermal capability to withstand that aggressive temperature, whereas other materials like polycarbonate, ABS, some of the polyolefins don't have that thermal capability and would likely deform in steam sterilization. So as mentioned, these aggressive conditions mean that considerations have to be taken to accommodate the repeat exposure cycling in both the material selection and in the design that you choose for the parts. So specialty polymers have shown that they can maintain their mechanics and aesthetics even after hundreds of cycles. So, if there are questions regarding how to design with these materials, feel free to reach out to Syensqo. And then this is a graphic to depict the performance hierarchy within our materials for reusable surgical instruments. So what is important to note here is the number of sterilization cycles that an application is expected to withstand will help determine the right material. So if you're just looking at 100, maybe 200, 300, 400 cycles of autoclave, then it's possible our UDEL PSU material would be an option, and especially if we're talking about replacing polycarbonate. But sterilization cycles up to or over 1,000 would need to be a Radel PPSU or higher on that ladder. So the Radel we see used in industry as instrument handles, as cases and trays, and then moving up the ladder, we have our Avispire PAEK, which can offer more toughness and ductility than PEEK. It's really kind of like an in-between of the Radel and the PEEK. If you need a little bit more performance than Radel, but don't need to bump all the way up to PEEK, we would consider the Avispire. Our Ketaspire PEEK, it's the top echelon. It'll have the highest fatigue resistance, so it's heavily used for metal to plastic replacement in instruments that will be reused. So whereas ICSF is used metal to plastic for single use, if metal to plastic is required for a reusable instrument, then we would usually look at PEEK. And then here again, just highlighting the sterilization compatibility of the resins we've talked about. This can help indicate what types of applications our materials should go into. So you see ICSF, not really compatible with steam, but it does work well after exposure to any of the more standard single-use sterilization techniques. Okay, and then for implantable applications, these are very sensitive, demanding applications requiring only the most proven, optimized polymer for these needs. We currently have 3 implantable materials in our portfolio, as you see listed: PEEK, PPSU, and PSU. We're actually at Syensqo currently the only resin supplier who offers implantable sulfone materials. So that's our Eviva PSU and Veriva PPSU. We just talked about radal PPSU, which is very well known in the space. Veriva PPSU is the equivalent of an implantable radal. So these materials are uniquely designed to offer high performance in areas including ortho, cardio, spine, trauma. And we've completed extensive biocompatibility testing on these materials, and they're currently commercially used in medical applications today. They're compatible with a variety of sterilization methods just to help accommodate unique manufacturing. And so our Zeneva Peak is normally selected for implantable applications which are load-bearing or will see high forces. So the wear resistance, the radio translucency, and a density close to bone are all factors that would advance Zeneva Peak into this orthopedic application over an implantable metal component. So the unique features of Peak allowed it to be used here. Our Aviva PSU is an implantable sulfone material that has been used across the surgical space, but this application highlights its unique value in a cardiovascular component. So Aviva PSU offered a more cost-effective solution by lowering the total manufacturing cost of the component. You know, the ability to injection mold this resin meant that the components came straight out of the mold, no additional secondary steps required, no painting, no polishing. It was just ready to go. Our Solviva implantable materials are produced at our Alpharetta, Georgia location within our ISO 13485 facility and manufacturing clean room. So we've got a dedicated regulatory team at Syensqo who can work to support any requirements, regulatory questions our customers may have. Okay, and then in general, we've gone ahead and walked through some of our major areas where Syensqo materials are located, you know, the biopharma, instrumentation, implants, but also we're involved throughout the space in more auxiliary equipment like medical housings, machinery, lighting, and just more medical industrial applications. So basically we're located in areas across the operating room, and to be as prolific as we are in the medical space, it means that we do have to have some level of precision into these really sensitive applications. So luckily, you know, we're able to provide support in selecting a material, but also across our portfolio, we've got unique attributes that will help you determine which material is right, and there's design considerations, processing considerations, sterilization considerations, we can help support. Okay, and then we'll move on. I think I'll go ahead and hand it to Jordan to speak a little bit more about our capabilities.
Thanks, Allison. So at the beginning of the webinar, Len mentioned that we do have a Sodick machine. It is in fact GL30LP. We commissioned this actually just at the end of last year, so we've had some time to play with it. The reason that we invested in this machine was so that we could start taking a very serious look at our polymer behavior at very small and micro scales. So we really want to understand where fundamental assumptions about plastics and their behavior break down. So to see what we can learn about how things may be different for our high performance polymers. So we built a suite of special molds. In fact, you can stay on the previous slide, Allison. If you can go back one slide. Thank you, perfect. So we built a suite of special molds. The first of which, as you can see, was just a very thin walled spiral flow. And one of the reasons that we find these tools valuable is so that we can develop and then validate material models for simulation. For example, if you were working with a very thin walled component, you wanted to know if one of our materials would fill your features with a reasonable pressure, you could simulate it with something like mold flow. But how do you know that the predicted pressures are realistic when you're working at such a different scale than what you're used to? These are the sorts of questions that we're trying to answer. Just as an example, if you look at traditional models for for looking at polymer rheology. It's very common to see these multi-shear curves like what's shown on the slide here, where they taper off into an asymptote. And in fact, at very, very high shear rates, that's very common in micromolding type applications, polymers will actually realize a second Newtonian plateau. This is something that, speaking personally, it was relatively new to me. And it's not always captured in the sort of models that you use for simulation. So we're also working on innovative methodology to measure this accurately, work it into our models. So just as an example, the kind of things we're working on. You can go to the next slide, please. So for mechanical behavior, we also developed a set of tools with some miniaturized tensile bars. You can see the image in the top right, how small this part is compared to a quarter. So it makes sense, right? If you're trying to design at this scale, you may want properties that are actually measured at this scale. That's just that much closer to reality. So we have a specialized micromechanical frame. You can see the picture below. That's I guess a natural colored plastic that may be XF actually that's being tested in that picture. And so similar to how rheological behavior may be different at very small scales, we expect the same thing with the mechanical behavior. So at very thin-walled molding, you can have higher degrees of molecular alignment. Cooling rates can be dramatically different than what you're used to. You won't capture those effects with a basic ASTM or isobar, for example. So the example that you see in the bottom right-hand corner, that is actually one of our sulfone polymers. This tensile bar that's being tested has a cross-section of only 1 square millimeter. And we're actually able to see the necking region as it evolves and moves past on the camera. So, so really, I wanted to just share a snapshot of the sort of internal investigations that we're doing to learn more about the microscale behavior of specialty plastics. And we're empowered to do this now with the Sodick GL30 that we have in our lab. So I guess I'll end there and pass it back to you, Allison, or to Natalie. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Jordan. Just in conclusion, Allison and Jordan had already alluded to the services that we provide to our customers in the market. You can see them listed here, the technical services that we provide to customers, as well as the literature and data that we have available on our materials. We have a very vast library of information that we can provide on our materials. And then the regulatory support. We provide global regulatory support for all of our healthcare materials used here in the US, working with the FDA, and in Europe and Asia regions with the regulatory bodies in those regions. So next slide. I think with that, we can wrap it up. This is all of our contact information. Please feel free to reach out anytime with questions or if you'd like to discuss a project. And I think we can go ahead and open up to questions now.
All right. Well, thanks, Natalie. Great job, guys. Very informative. And yeah, go ahead. As Natalie said, go ahead and start submitting your questions. And I will relay them to the team here and we'll get those answered for you. We have a few that have come in already, so I'll go ahead and get started. Let's see. First one, good one for our purposes here. What are the minimum wall thicknesses for your polymers in injection molding?
Yeah, good question. And
oops, I think I might have had a little bit of an echo, but yeah, good question. Sorry, I will go ahead and answer this, but Jordan, feel free to come in as well. And the answer is that as you've seen from our presentation, our high performance resins differ not only from a physical standpoint, but also chemically and in their natural inherent polymer makeup. So what we would do is we would likely understand a little bit more about your application to help pinpoint which material is right for you. And then we would start talking about minimum wall thickness, because each material has a varying level of fill and it has a varying minimal wall thickness that it can hit based on aspect ratio. So condensing to the correct polymer would probably be our way to go, and then understanding your needs a little bit more. But Jordan, I don't know if you want to add on to that.
Yeah, very briefly, I'll say I think the only way to answer that question is it depends. It also depends on how fast and how much pressure you have to shoot your part. But as was shown a couple slides ago, the fact that we're now equipped with spiral flow tools down to 0.1 millimeter, we hope to be able to more authoritatively answer questions like that.
All right, well, thank you. That was good, very informative. Here comes another good one. Are some of your polymers more or less appropriate for very small or micro scale applications?
Again, I will make a comment and then I'll let Jordan answer based on his experience with micromolding. But we do see that some of our materials have an easier time filling out complex thin-walled geometries. So it's possible that if you do have a very thin part, we would look at some of our more high-flow materials. But I will make a comment that even across our individual polymers, say Radel, PPSU, we have varying viscosities available within that singular polymer to help accommodate very thin-walled injection molding all the way up to very thick stock shape extrusion. So I would say we do have opportunity to help.
Yeah, the behavior at the very thin walls, it is very material dependent. So in general, the more crystalline your material is, and then of course also the lower the melt flow rate or the lower the viscosity, the better flow you'll get in parts like that. So I don't think, I forget, Allison, if in this presentation we mentioned the fact that we also have Zidar LCP. You know, that would be a classic example of a material that is very much optimized for micromolding type applications. But depending on exactly what you want to do, there's no reason that you can't use Ketospire Peak as well. And we would probably point you towards our specialized lower viscosity grades, like Allison mentioned.
Okay, thank you. I have another good one here. Are there any special mold and or molding machine considerations that need to be considered for processing the IXEF para materials?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what I will say is that they can be processed via standard injection molding, but the main consideration has to do with the thermal capabilities of your machinery. And so in order for IXEF to achieve a really glossy surface finish, it normally has to have a mold temperature above what is possible for just a water-cooled tool. So normally when processing IXEF, we would consider a hot oil tool or a high pressure steam tool that can get up to those higher steel values and help encourage the both flow and proper cooling of the IXEF. So if there are additional questions, I'll refer you to our website, because we do have pretty comprehensive injection molding guides located on our website under the IXEF brand name. So it can be a bit of a maze on our website sometimes, but definitely feel free to contact us, send me an email right now if you have any comments, or if you would like me to directly send it to you.
Okay, great. Next one here is a comment and a question. I find the micromolding and modeling work very interesting, and I have been interested in work that explores the extreme processing conditions of plastic for some time. In using a 30-ton machine for micromolding, have you heard from the technical team that they would rather have a smaller machine for better process control?
I'll answer that. I think it comes down more to the size of the injection unit and not necessarily the size of the frame. So I think matching the part size that you're interested in studying to the size basically of the plunger. And then also when you're designing your tool, trying to balance the size of your filling system with the part that you want to mold. If your filling system is excessively large, you'll never achieve process control. Hopefully that answers your question. And I share your enthusiasm for that topic.
Yeah, that was a good one. Thank you. Another one here. Do your materials come in different colors, and do you offer custom colors for the healthcare space?
Yep, great question. We do have a range of stock colors available off the shelf, kind of across our portfolio. You know, for ICSF, we have some of the blues and grays that I showed. For Radel, we have more standard colors, like, you know, we have grays, a blue, maybe a yellow or a green. But if you're interested in custom compounding outside of that, the answer to that question is we're more than happy to talk about you know, material selection and volumes and what you're interested in specifically. But if we're not able to directly provide the custom color compounding that you're interested in, we do have a range of partners who are very well equipped and very knowledgeable about our materials, and they would be able to provide more information on custom coloring.
Okay, awesome. A couple more here. How are your polymers usually processed? Molding, machining, etc.?
Yep, good question. It is mostly, well, I would say it's very dependent. You know, injection molding for high volume, of course, and they're all compatible with injection molding. Similarly, you know, machining is possible with our materials, and it's encouraged for some applications, such as low volume, complex applications. My one comment there is that I'm always careful when machining a filled material. So an ICSF or a glass-filled, carbon-filled Ketaspire or PEEK, you know, you might not get the same level of robust properties when machining as you do when you get that really nice fiber alignment via injection molding. So they do have capabilities to be processed and manufactured in multiple ways, so yes.
Okay, thank you. I got another good one here. Are XF para materials suitable for use in a hot manifold or valve gate system?
That's a good question. And my answer to that is, again, yes. It likely depends on the gating size, but it's possible that they could be compatible if you're able to maintain the melt temperatures and the required hot runner and hot mold temperatures. So just being cognizant of your thermal control when processing ICSF, because it is a little bit higher than maybe some standard, more commoditized polymers.
I'll add to that we've certainly seen ICSF be used in that sort of scheme successfully. It is, as for a polyamide, quite thermally stable, and in, you know, using hot runners, one of the issues is just thermal stability. But the caveat there is moisture control.
Okay, good. Okay, I think we'll do one more here. What kind of technical support does Syensqo offer potential customers?
Yeah, good question. I think we had a slide about it. So let me see if I can go back. Yep, so again, you can kind of see those highlighted here under state-of-the-art technical services. You know, we really want to see our customers succeed, because then that makes us winners too, and everyone loves to be a winner. So we offer, you know, reviews of drawings, of designs, and we'll provide insight on maybe considerations in general when working with our polymers. But then if you want to go a step further, we can help offer mold flow and more computer-aided engineering designing, FEA analysis, And if we get to a point too where maybe the need for on-site processing support is there, we'll be happy to come out and have kind of like boots on the ground, troubleshooting initiative, even with our technical representatives there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Allison. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Natalie. I appreciate you guys supporting our Sodick and Friends platform today. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. As we talked about earlier, we do have some more upcoming Sodick and Friends webinars, so stay tuned for that. And feel free to reach out to Jordan, Allison, and Natalie if you have any further questions. But otherwise, I thank you guys all for joining and look forward to seeing you next time.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.